Welcome back to Sledgehammer Horror, guys. I am Ken Sledge, and let's talk horror. Now, today I am joined by the amazing Terrah Card. Terrah, how you doing today?
I am lovely and very sweaty. How are you,
Well,
Ken?
I am doing amazing, and it is so awesome to have you here. I'm a big fan of you, and to reach out to you and have you be willing to come on and hang out with me for a little bit is super amazing. Now, before we get started on the reason you're here, I want the people that don't know you to get a chance to know you here for a second. Terrah is a drag queen from Florida. She's been doing drag for almost 5 years in the Panhandle.
Mhm.
Now, while you do performing, you do your own sewing, you do all your own the creation, everything for your look is done by you. Now,
Mhm.
before we go any farther, what got you into doing the I don't want to say what got you into drag because you are who you are and that's who you've always been. But what got you into the sewing and the designing? Like what made you decide this is what I want to create my own things here?
So when I was young, and I'll make this pretty short, when I was young, I did not have a lot of friends. Shocker, who would have thought? But I always my mother was a single mother with three kids, and sometimes fast food was the easiest option to feed us. And when I had my little like box of nuggets and my fries, I would take like the straw out and I'd give my fries with like the container with like arms, and then I would stack that onto the nugget box and make like a weird kind of like doll in a way, a weird kind of action
Sure.
figure. And I always was pretty artistic throughout my whole life. And I never really stuck with anything because I feel like I could do something, but I could always be better at something else. And I feel like drag kind of connected everything for me. And I really didn't even know what drag was until about like 6 years ago. So it's still very new to me. I actually didn't grow up in the States. I grew up on a military base overseas for a majority of my life. And yeah, there's a show on that is now on Shutter. It's called Dragula, the Boulet Brothers Dragula. And that's for those who don't know what it is, if you're familiar with Drag Race, it's like a drag competition show mixed in with like fear factors. So sometimes if you're in the bottom for a challenge, they throw you out of a plane. Like it's pretty crazy. And but the art of it is like what really got me into sewing. When I watched the first season, and the first season is one of my favorite kind of little horror reality TV shows because it's so hokey pokey, but it has a little charm to it on how it was presented. And there's an artist on there named Vander Von Odd, and she was very new to drag, and she was saying that I sew all my stuff, and I was like, oh, if I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna do the same thing too. So I never had any sewing lessons, didn't know anything like that, just looked on YouTube on how to do it, and here I am now. So I've gotten into like prosthetics lately, so I've been working around with that. So
It looks fucking fantastic.
thank you. It's a good old uh, flour, like cooking flour mixed in with liquid latex. So, and
Yeah.
then you just add that to texture. Like I made the corset as the base, and I have another one, but that shit is so fucking tight. I do not want to sit down and wear it. So I was like, I'll at least wear my little neck corset.
Right.
So
Well, and one thing I was to say, like you said, you just found out about like what drag was about 6 years ago, but better late than never. Because the way I look at it, we're lucky if we get 100 years on this planet. You don't
yeah.
want to spend any time of that not being yourself, being unhappy, being scared. So I'm glad that you were able to find this and help it to become who you are today. I think that's super special and it's super
Mhm.
amazing. And it can be an inspiration for younger people that are scared. We live in a society still where it's okay to be who you are, but there is still that stigma about being who you are sometimes in certain
Yeah.
areas. So maybe someone can look at you as an inspiration to be who they really want to be. And that's something that you can't pay for. That's something
Mhm.
that you can't, you know what I mean? Like that's something you can't just give away. It's something special that you have. And I'm very honored to have you as a guest. But I do want to say, horror and drag, you make it look fucking amazing. You put them together. And on top of that, you do the podcast, Stay on the Line, where you talk about horror movies, shows, news, and more. And you created the podcast because for you, growing up, horror was a way to connect with friends. Like me, I grew up pre 1996. In 1996, when Scream came out, is when horror became cool. Before that, if
Mhm.
you watched horror after October, you were fucking
Yeah,
weird.
nerd.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you're right. It was a way for you to sit down and indulge with your friends for 90 minutes, whether it was a good movie or a bad movie. You could still have the best of times making fun of a horror movie. So
Mhm.
um, stay on the line. what can you tell people that haven't listened to the podcast a little bit more about what you do over there?
Okay, so I host a horror genre podcast called Stay on the Line. It's a two-time award-nominated podcast. Yeah,
Woo!
here in the Gulf Coast, they do this thing called Best of the Coast, where like businesses, podcasts, all that. I've been runner-up twice, but I'm fine with just being nominated. You know, they only
Yeah.
nominate 4 people. This is the same with being a drag entertainer. I've been nominated 4 times. I'm the only person that's been nominated 4 times consecutively. So at least I'm consistent with losing. But you know,
Stop it.
the reason I like the like, if you're familiar with my podcast, which not that many people know about it, it's just like I host it, and then I'll bring a friend in via either in person or through a Zoom, and we'll talk about either horror movies. We've been talking about Dracula, the TV show I just talked about earlier. Sometimes do like news things or like weird ways that people have survived. Like I remember I did a research episode where this guy had a like metal rod launched through his head through the back, and he survived that. I don't know how that happened, but it was insane. So yeah, sometimes we'll do little research episodes like that, or just kind of have fun. My favorite is actually has nothing to do with technically the horror aspect, but I read misconnections on a thing called Double List, and it's just very strange sexual people. So to me, I find that horrific. So I always just read those out, and yeah, it's pretty weird, but that's kind of
Well,
my
the best thing
podcast.
about this is if you guys haven't heard the podcast, you don't have to go far to find it because the links are right down here in the description, as
Yeah.
well as all of Terrah's social media links. So make sure that you're following those. Make sure you're subscribing to the podcast, because not only do you get to hear some amazing stories from her, but you get to hear a lot of amazing guests come on the
Mhm.
show as well. So there's nothing else you could literally want. It's one of the podcasts I put up there with Dead Meat, Nightmare Junkhead, that I listen to consistently. So please make sure you're following the Terrah on social media, as well as
Mhm.
subscribing to the podcast wherever you get your podcast. Again, all you gotta do is a click. So
Yeah.
in
Also,
order
if you have money, you can send that to me too.
absolutely, that goes without saying.
Yeah.
Um,
Send some to Ken too. He works very hard.
I would never be against that. Um, so we talk about how important horror is to the both of us. And for people like us, sometimes growing up, that's all you had was to throw on Gremlins or House or Nightmare on Elm Street, and those were your friends. We didn't have
Mhm.
social media to stay connected or Zoom to be able to have that, person to person contact. So, in order for you to do a horror podcast or even to do drag horror inspired, horror had to start for you somewhere. So I would like to go back to the past and talk about what got you started in the horror genre, your first horror movie, and your first horror movie was.
It was okay. I think it was the Dawn of the Dead 2003 remake, but to be honest with y'all, I remember being in a movie theater watching a horror movie when I was like 2 or 3, and I couldn't tell you what it was, but
Right.
that's the one that I remember that kind of stuck with me, like that and Shaun of the Dead. I remember I watched them at like I think the same day. Yeah, I probably shouldn't at that age, but I enjoyed it. But yeah, Dawn of the Dead remake 20 or not 2020, 2003,
Yeah.
I think.
And it's funny that you bring up Shaun of the Dead, because a lot of people, especially that have never seen it, are like, oh, it's a spoof movie, like a scary movie or Airplane. Fuck no, it isn't. Shaun of the Dead
No.
is its own movie with a spoof title. And I don't care if I watch Shaun of the Dead 10 times in a row. And again, this is me being Ken Sledge, the genuine human being. I will fucking cry every single time we get to the part with Barbara in the bar. I'm crying.
Yeah, that's really
Every
sad.
every time I watch this movie, I'm gonna bawl my eyes out. It's one of my favorite horror comedies of all time. But
Yeah.
that's not what we're here to talk about. We're here to talk about Zack Snyder's Dawn of the Dead, one of the, in my opinion, best remakes of all time. So we know that you were a young lady when you watched this for the first time, but do you remember who you watched it with?
I think I was with my brothers, and I was on a flight line. I was in an aircraft hangar because my dad was in the military. So my dad did not give a fuck what we were watching. So, we would it was kind of cool. The setup was like really cool. So he worked downstairs, and then we're in a legit aircraft military hangar. And upstairs they just have this like whole kind of chill room with a big TV, you know, the big chunky TVs back in
Sure.
the day. Everyone almost had one, and we thought we were rich as fuck. But it was like it was one of those big chunky TVs, and I remember watching Dawn of the Dead on there, and yeah. I remember I was like, zombies aren't allowed to run that fast. When I was watching it, I was like, they can't do that. They're not allowed because I would die.
Well, one scene to me when you're talking about the running zombies is at the very beginning, not the very beginning, but when you get to the mall for the first time and you see the
Yeah,
Asian guy walking and he
with
turns
the one arm.
and he turns with the one arm and he just starts sprinting towards them, which I
Yeah.
also really cool is that guy really was an amputee. He really only had that
Oh,
wasn't
cool.
yeah, that was a real, and I thought that was amazing that they used that guy for that role.
Yeah.
And holy shit, you're starting off with a bang at that moment. 'Cause that is so
Yeah.
fucking scary to get that sprint. And they're shooting him. They don't know what's going
Yeah.
on yet. And, he's taking those and he's still running. Like, oh, what a
Yeah.
great scene.
I mean, even the beginning of that movie when she's leaving her house and all the chaos is happening, you know, her partner gets attacked by the little girl, which I was like, y'all just leave your door open and people come in. Okay. Would not be me. Would not be me. But yeah, just how that starts is so crazy. There's a lot of movies. I know we're gonna talk about a specific one there's a lot of scenes in this movie that are standouts, even for a remake. But even just the person being they're being attacked, the us like that shot, I remember the sprinting, one arm man. Yeah, there's a lot in this where I was like, little old me was like, oh my god,
Yeah,
I'm
this is a
gonna keep
great
watching this, but I'm
start to that too.
Mhm.
Um, like even that beginning, the little girl when she comes out of the shadow and you see she's fucked up, and then she bites the
Yeah,
husband's neck. Like, oh, it's so gnarly.
yeah.
So let's jump right into that. So there's a bunch, like you were just saying, there's a lot of very effective scenes in this
Mhm.
movie, and it stays true enough to the OG, but it really is its own movie.
Yeah, I
Now,
agree.
which scene would you say it was that affected you the most from Dawn of the
Okay,
Dead?
so at second place, it was the larger woman who gets infected that they kind of bring in. But first place, it's not even like that long of a scene. It's about probably like 5 seconds, and it's when they're in the little convoy kind of thing, and they're going to the dock, and the older gentleman's like, "Hey, there's a zombie. Let me get it. I'll be fine." And he accidentally falls onto the other woman and like saws her. It like from the shoulder down. And I was reading the comments because I wanted to rewatch it again. I was reading the comments on the YouTube video, and they're like, "This is so hilarious." I was like, to me, I found it very horrific because I feel like there's nothing more scarier in most movies than an accidental death or
Yeah,
anything like that, because you know the intentions aren't to be cruel, and it's just horrific how that stuff does really happen. Accidental
yeah.
deaths, that really does happen. You know, I had a neighbor when I was very young. He got his arm mowed over with a lawnmower, and like that, and it was on accident. You know, it's like that to me kind of stuck out more than the zombie baby or you know anything kind of absurd in this movie, because I don't know. And I remember as a kid I was in the behind the scenes watching them how they did that prosthetic, and I was like, okay, I get it's not real, but it was still scary for me.
Yeah, and you're right because especially at this point of the movie, they're home free. They're on the bus.
Yeah,
They're going. She survived. She
yeah,
made it, and then this accident takes her. And before we move on to my next question, though, I do want to bounce back because the bigger old lady, when you think she's dead, and then the
yeah,
camera pans over and she's already sitting back up, and the blanket falls,
yeah,
and she gets up and does that full speed sprint, only to get stuck in
yeah.
the eye. Like
Ugh.
I remember we seen this in cinema and the
Mhm.
whole theater erupted when that lady started running, whether it was
Yeah,
laughing or straight up screaming. Like the whole theater erupted at that moment. So that's a moment that always will stick with me. So
yeah.
um this movie is very impactful, but at the same time, there's a lot of beautiful scenery throughout the movie.
Mhm.
Do you remember what your favorite scene from Dawn of the Dead is?
Honestly, probably that opening shot where it's the kind of like the bird's eye view and it's following her as she's driving away. We see one of the cars crashes into a gas station and it explodes. Kind of just like that opening beginning of when the chaos is happening. We're following her as she is I don't know if anyone's ever been in a situation where they have been woken up to a complete shock of events going on. I've lived through a 9.0 earthquake. I've lived through like a lot of things. So to be woken up by that, it's very startling. So to see her kind of witness everything, I can like also imagine,
Sure.
oh my God, that shit. Like I know how that feels. So I mean, to an extent, I didn't witness no zombies running around, but I do live in Florida. People do eat bath salts and eat faces. So
True that.
That and then I enjoyed the it's not necessarily like the best cinematography, but I enjoyed the ending part when it's just the camera footage of them on the boat, and it's like the credits are rolling. That's just one thing I like. I do enjoy a good like found footage kind of style stuff. So
For all things considered, it's a happy ending.
yeah, if you stop the movie right there, you are good. Before they get to the other island, you are good.
Perfect ending.
Yeah.
But you did touch for a very little bit on something that I did want to bring up, and it's the scene where you have the pregnant woman that's giving birth and she's chained up, and you see her zombified.
Yeah, she's not looking good.
Right, and the dad, obviously the older lady comes in and he's like, "It's a girl," Then they have the gunfight.
Yeah.
And then later you have them come over and pull the blanket off the baby, and the baby is a zombie too.
Yeah.
And that's one of those moments where you're like, oh my God, it's a fucking baby zombie. That is, it's so outrageous that it's amazing. So I just wanted to touch on that scene real quick because that's probably the scene that stuck out the most to me watching the first time.
This is kind of like off topic, but have you seen Virus 32? It's a newer movie that came out this year. It's a Spanish film. If you love zombie movies, it's an interesting take. You should definitely check it out. It's on Shudder, so
I will absolutely check it out. You said what was it called?
Virus 32. So the general concept is like, I mean, they say it in the bio of the movie is like when the zombie has killed something, it's basically in a comatose state for 32 seconds before it starts acting crazy again. So interesting concept. Definitely check it out. It cost like $1 million to make it, and they only made 90,000. So check out this cool movie, y'all. I thought it was really good. So
well, I've got it written down right here, guys. So Virus 32. If it's on Shudder, I'm gonna watch it. It's my favorite streaming service.
Yeah,
so.
Shudder sponsor. This Shudder sponsor you can.
God, I fucking wish.
Yeah, well, they better. So
I bring up Shudder every episode, and they've never sponsored me. I gotta say again, guys. I'm genuine about everything. I just fucking love Shudder.
You know what? They follow me, so I'll try adding them. Like, hey, y'all should sponsor Ken. So
right now,
yeah.
So we talked about your first horror movie and how important Dawn of the Dead is to you. Since usually I ask, would you like to see your first horror movie remade today? Now, Dawn of the Dead is a remake. Since you watched that first, were you able to go back and revisit the OG? And if so, what are your thoughts on the OG?
Yes, it's George A. Romero, right? Yep. Who did that one? Funny. Joe Hill actually writes about being on set, like a fictional story about. I don't know. Have you read the book, The Black Phone? Yeah. I mean, there's a short story about it, which I was reading that, and I was like, whoa, okay, cool. I like that movie. It has a little bit of like the blood is very comical. I love how deep or bright and red it is. There's a lot of things, especially how that opens. There's a lot of racially motivated things that are happening in there. A lot of important context that can be applied today, and I really like that. And I just the entire scene of being taken place at a mall, them clearing out the mall is kind of fun. It has its moments where it's charming, and then it's also very devastating too. But that does ultimately have a happy ending, which I did enjoy that. And the zombies were not fast. So
right. Oh yeah, they're definitely not fast in this one. And we just got to remind everybody, there is a character named Sledge in that movie. So we'll always have a special place in my heart.
Yeah.
So we know about your first horror movie and what Dawn of the Dead 03 means to you. But now they have wrapped up filming on Scream 6. So my buddy Ghostface is back to join us. And Terrah, Ghostface has a question for you now. What's your favorite scary movie, Terrah?
Okay.
What is your favorite horror movie of all time?
I know you asked this question, so I was like, I made sure to think about it before
Yeah,
I.
now I know you've watched it because I never tell anybody I'm going to ask this question.
Yeah. I was like, he didn't ask that in the little like thing that you sent me, so I was like, okay, I'm gonna think about what I'm gonna watch or what I'm gonna say. So for me, I do enjoy Alien. The original Alien was Sigourney Weaver. However, it is a technically it's a remake, but they said it's kind of like a sequel in a way. But Evil Dead 2013. Evil Dead 2013, like to me, encapsulates like I don't know if you know much about the behind the scenes things, but I remember I think it was the director or someone was saying that it's just that the forest, for those who don't know anything about the Evil Dead, hello. Hi, nice to meet you. Evil Dead is basically it takes place in a cabin, and it's the forest is basically evil. And I remember someone on set was saying that this isn't technically a remake because the forest works in ways for the events to happen again. That's why Evil Dead 1 and Evil Dead 2 are very similar, but we're missing some characters. It's because
Yeah.
the forest works in ways to have things be similar but not be the same at the same time. So for me, this 2013 version, it really added a lot that wasn't campy like the first three. I thought that I didn't know where it was going to go, and I think just the opening shot of her, or not really opening, but when she is running through the forest and this entity is chasing her, or even when the friend is turning into a deadite and is getting smashed over the head with the like the tanker top from a toilet. It was just very alarming to me, and I just really enjoyed it. It kept me on my feet even towards the end. I'm not going to say what happens because I don't want to spoil the movie. However, go fucking check it out. It's a really good time. If you watch the original movies and you're thinking you know how this is going to end and you haven't seen this movie, it is going to change it for you.
It's my favorite remake of all time. Um, it is uh beautiful storytelling. It's not your typical a bunch of kids are going to party in the woods.
Mhm.
What's going on here is they're trying to get their friend slash sister clean off dope. She's
Yeah,
been on
Mia.
heroin and they're trying to clean her up.
Mhm.
And that's why they won't let her leave. That's why they went to this isolated cabin. Like it's so
Mhm.
goddamn smart. Um, it doesn't play on your normal horror tropes.
Yeah.
And it's oh my god, I could do a whole episode about how special Evil Dead 2013 is and how important that movie is. It's just it's one of those movies I like more than the original. I
Yeah.
like Evil Dead 2013 more than the OG Evil Dead.
And
It's
that can't
just
be said about a lot of remakes. I
right,
prefer this over the original.
100%. It's just watch as someone that struggled with addiction in their younger life that luckily got clean before anything bad happened.
Yeah.
Um, you feel it,
Yeah.
you know, when she's pacing, when she smells things, when she's, you think that she's just trying to weasel her way out again. Like it's just
But she's
so
actually telling the truth. Like she's just
right,
really being gaslit by everyone, but which is unfortunate. She is clearly having withdrawals, but there's also this thing,
evil.
this evil that is going to kill everybody, and she knows it. So
Right. I'm so glad that you said that because that's such a great movie.
I feel like it's very underrated.
Oh, 100%. People hear
Yeah.
Evil Dead and they're like, oh, it's a remake. I'm not going to watch it. Evil
Yeah.
Dead 2013 is I'll put it with these three movies: Evil Dead 2013, Dawn of the Dead '03, and Child's
Mhm.
Play 2019 are a fucking
Ooh.
blueprint on how to do a remake. You take that original idea and you morph it into your own idea. You have your, because again, I'm with you. I don't think Evil Dead 2013 is as much of a remake as it is a sequel,
Yeah.
but you know those type of movies where you're going to use that original name, but you're taking the skeleton and you're putting
Yeah.
your own organs in it, your own skin over top of it. That's what I want to see. I don't want to see the original done again. I've already seen the original. Give
Yeah.
me something in the same vein, but make it your own. And I think that's when a remake slash sequel slash requel is perfect.
Yeah. Can I ask you a question on a specific remake?
Sure.
So, how did you ever watch the Suspiria remake and or the original too?
I've watched both. To me, the Suspiria remake, I wouldn't file it under good or bad as much as I would really just like unnecessary, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, I
Um,
feel the same way, but that is one where I know that they did take kind of a different approach to it.
yeah,
I prefer the original Suspiria. That's probably another one of my favorite movies.
yeah.
So yeah.
I just think I just think it was just an unnecessary remake. I look at that like I look at Vince Vaughn's Psycho or the new Carrie remake. It's just
Yeah.
the movies aren't terrible. They're not bad. Like especially like the Carrie or Psycho. If people are like, I fucking hate Vince Vaughn's Psycho or I hate that Carrie, I'm like, that it's like scene for scene, right? Like
Yeah,
it's the
minus like a
exact
little
same.
kind of hanky panky going on in that
Yeah,
one, but
but it's just to me, it's just like you know, were the originals better? Sure, but these movies aren't bad. They're almost the exact same thing. They're just unnecessary. There was no reason
mhm.
to do it except for people trying to capitalize on money. At
Yep.
least with Suspiria, they chose a movie that was maybe in the general public not as well known as maybe a Psycho or a Carrie. So maybe I've said this to my whole life: a bad remake can still have great qualities because people that had never seen Suspiria will watch that remake and go, "Oh, this is a remake. Well, let me check out the original."
Oh yeah.
Same thing with Carrie or Psycho or Halloween's requels. People, I've never seen the original. Let me go back. So the originals get a boost again
Yeah.
because of a remake. So I think that
Yeah.
there's so many good things that could come from even a bad remake.
Mhm.
So I had an amazing time talking to you about how horror started for you, your first horror movie, your favorite horror movie. But before I let you go, we always end these with the same question. We're going to go back to our skull count. Now, as always, we're not ranking Dawn of the Dead on acting, production, score, nothing like that. What we're
Mhm.
doing here is strictly ranking this movie on how much it affected you on first viewing. So, zero skulls being not effective, five being extremely effective. You can use half and quarter skulls anywhere in the middle. What
Yeah.
would your ranking of Dawn of the Dead be?
I mean, I viewed it when I was like 7, so it terrified the shit out of me. So for that, I would have to give it a 5. Now,
Mhm.
if I rewatched it again today and kind of compared how I feel, I'd probably think of like, the logistics of some things, but I still think it holds up. I think it holds up. So I think 5 is appropriate for 7-year-old me. So
Right, and not just that, but I just went back and rewatched it yesterday because I always want to refresh myself before I do an episode, and I
mm,
still love this movie. Like, there's still parts that make me jump. There's still characters I want to punch in the fucking face. Like the movie
yeah.
is such a good way of it incorporates everything into it. So I completely agree with you. Now, as always, guys, we're at the end of the third act. So as you know, the credits are about to roll and the curtain's about to drop. But before that happens, there's some social media and podcast links down here in the description that you need to do some clicking on. So
Yeah.
um, thank you guys so much for being a part of this. Terrah, please don't go anywhere. I got a couple more questions for you. Everybody else, as always, keep talking horror, stay what you are, and we'll see you guys soon.